want you to just stop and picture this with me. We are standing at the absolute pinnacle of human power. Imagine these colossal, sun-baked stone pillars casting giant shadows across the sand. This is an empire built on the unshakable, deeply arrogant certainty of its own divinity. It's untouchable, right? But today, the scripture reveals the beginning of a massive, systematic, divine deconstruction. We're stepping into this profoundly terrifying reality where the very foundations of the natural world, the physics, the biology, are all about to be completely unmade. Welcome to an epic unraveling.
So put yourself right in the middle of that throne room. You can almost feel the chill of the polished granite floors, the echoing, heavy silence in the air. And standing there is this 80-year-old shepherd, Moses, locking eyes with the most powerful, ruthless monarch on the entire planet. The Bible records this ancient collision of wills, and, it's not a negotiation at all. It is an uncompromising demand from a much higher throne. Think about the sheer psychological weight of this moment. Pharaoh is looking down, entirely secure in his massive military might, expecting Moses to grovel, but instead, he's hit with an impossible warning. The scripture reveals that this is the exact moment the tectonic plates of spiritual authority begin to grind together. It forces the question, if the God you worship is the river beneath your feet, well, to whom do you pray when it turns to blood?
Now let's watch how this begins, but I want to slow it down to an agonizing crawl. The scripture says Aaron cast down his staff. Imagine the sound, that heavy, hollow thud of dry, dead wood hitting the cold stone. You can almost feel the vibration travel through the floorboards. And then, the absolute subversion of natural law happens right before their eyes. Watch closely as the rigid dead wood fibers actually begin to split apart. They stretch, they pulse, softening into this wet, glistening scale, expanding into coiled, living muscle. This dead branch literally transmutes into a massive, hissing serpent. Now, the Egyptian magicians, they're sweating bullets under the heavy gaze of their king, right? So they throw down their own staves, and incredibly, their wood also contorts into serpents. But then, the Bible records a terrifying supremacy. Aaron's serpent turns, it unhinges its jaw, and you can almost hear the sickening crunch of bone and scale as it violently, effortlessly consumes the conjured serpents of the empire. The dominance of the divine is established right there, in the dust of the throne room floor.
From that dark throne room, the escalation bursts out into the open, striking the empire's literal lifeline, the mighty Nile. Aaron stretches out his hand, and the scripture reveals this terrifying molecular shift sweeping across the entire aquatic ecosystem. Picture the clear, cool, flowing water, and then, in a fraction of a second, the hydrogen and oxygen bonds just fracture. They transmute instantly into a thick, heavy, metallic-smelling crimson slurry. Imagine we're looking down from a high aerial view. The Nile isn't a river anymore. It looks like a severed artery bleeding out across the pale desert sands. Below the surface, the fish are suddenly drowning in this coagulated blood, thrashing, suffocating. The Bible records that the river stank, a foul, rotting odor that completely choked the empire for 7 relentless days. The lifeblood of Egypt is bleeding out.
Okay, we need to zoom all the way in now, past the grand landscapes, right down to the atomic level of the earth itself. Aaron's staff strikes the dry, sun-baked dust of the ground. I want you to vividly visualize these microparticles of dirt, billions of dead, microscopic fragments of quartz and sand just lying there. As the wood hits the earth, a divine shockwave passes through the soil. The scripture reveals that these lifeless specks of dust actually start to tremble. The molecular structure shatters and violently reknits. In a microsecond, the dead dirt erupts into a writhing, crawling swarm of lice. Legs, mandibles, living tissue spontaneously generating out of nothing but dry earth. And the Egyptian magicians? They're just standing there, absolutely drenched in a cold sweat. They command their incantations. They try to force their dark arts to replicate this biological spontaneous generation, and nothing. Not a single thing happens. The dust just remains dust.
And right here, this is the breaking point for the elite, the magicians, the intellectual bedrock of Pharaoh's entire court. They just lowered their hands. Their technology, their magic, their centuries of prowess has completely crumbled into the very dirt they couldn't transform. They look at their king, eyes wide with this paralyzing, creeping terror, and they confess. The scripture records their exact words echoing through those massive corridors of power. This is the finger of God. Just think about the sheer psychological collapse happening in that room. The undisputed experts of the known world are openly admitting devastating defeat. They are staring at a dimensional strike that completely overrides the physics of their reality. They know, without a shadow of a doubt, they are fighting the architect of the universe. And yet, the Bible records that the Pharaoh's heart remained rigid.
Which brings us to the next phase, the surgical divine strike, a separation of two lands. And this is where things get intensely precise.
You have to look at the stark visual theology playing out here. Imagine a split screen. On one side of this invisible divine boundary, the Egyptian empire is literally descending into a hellscape. Picture this heavy, sickly yellow haze hanging thick in the air. The oppressive, deafening buzzing of millions of flies forming these thick black storm clouds that block out the sun. Their majestic livestock collapsing, rotting from disease in the fields. It's a landscape of profound, inescapable decay. But look across the border to Goshen, where the Israelites dwell. The Bible records a reality so utterly different it completely defies all meteorological and biological laws. Over there, picture this beautiful, warm, golden hour light cascading over vibrant, swaying wheat fields. The air is crisp and clear. The cattle are just grazing peacefully. The scripture reveals that not one single swarming fly crosses that invisible border. Not one diseased breath infects the herds of Goshen. The Creator is demonstrating absolute microscopic control over exactly where that power falls. Now picture Moses standing in front of a massive roaring furnace. He reaches in and his bare hands scoop up this rough, abrasive black soot, the literal ashes of Egyptian industry. The scripture says he stands before Pharaoh and just throws that ash high into the sky. Let's trace this physical action in super slow motion. Watch the silent, graceful arc of the black ash suspended against the glaring Egyptian sun. The hot wind catches it. The fine, dark particles disperse, drifting downward like silent, deadly volcanic fallout. And the second a single microscopic flake of this black ash makes contact with human skin or the hide of a beast, a violent chemical reaction explodes. The flesh instantly reddens, bubbles, and erupts into agonizing, festering boils. The Bible records that the pain was so blinding, the magicians couldn't even physically stand up before Moses. The empire is, quite literally, breaking out in agony.
Then the air suddenly grows freezing cold. The familiar blue sky above Egypt fractures into this bruised, violent, unnatural black. Moses stretches his wooden staff toward the heavens, and the scripture reveals an apocalyptic destruction. The clouds just tear wide open. Heavy, jagged shards of solid ice plummet to the earth. But listen, this is not just a hailstorm. The Bible records that fire flashed continually in the midst of the hail. Imagine that terrifying visual, heavy, crushing ice and violent, blinding lightning intermingling, cascading down together like a barrage of divine artillery. The thunder is absolutely deafening. The jagged ice is shattering ancient, massive trees like glass. The fire runs along the ground, striking down every single man and beast left exposed in the fields. It is a total, devastating sensory bombardment. And yet the text is painstakingly clear. Back in the land of Goshen, bathed in its quiet light, not a single drop of rain, not a single spark of fire falls to the earth.
The psychological engine driving this whole epic forward is absolutely fascinating. Take a look at this timeline. It brilliantly illustrates the terrifying, stubborn loop of the human will. Look at the rhythm here. Hour 1, the devastating judgment falls. The hail, the fire, the unbearable pressure. It's overwhelming. By hour 12, Pharaoh, who is entirely broken by the sheer sensory overload of this destruction, offers a frantic, desperate apology. By hour 24, Moses prays, the thunder immediately ceases, and divine relief is granted. The sky clears up. But then, as the scripture records over and over again, by hour 48, the exact moment the immediate physical pain is removed, Pharaoh's heart hardens like cooling iron.
The Bible reveals a profound reality here. The Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart to display absolute sovereign power. It's this methodical, almost cosmic chess match where the ruler of the earth is allowed to exercise his own arrogant pride, solely to build the platform for an even greater revelation of divine justice.
Let's really deconstruct this specific moment where he breaks. The hail is actively smashing against the stone walls of the palace. The fire is consuming the empire's crops. Pharaoh screams for Moses. The monarch is breathless. His eyes are wide with the raw, unfiltered terror of a man who suddenly realizes he is entirely outmatched. The scripture records his confession, "The Lord is in the right, and I and my people are in the wrong." I mean, it sounds profound, doesn't it? But we really have to look closer. This is a hollow, empty confession. It's a hyperventilating political maneuver designed entirely to just make the pain stop. There's absolutely no actual surrender in his chest. The Bible reveals that the very moment the thunder ceased and the rain stopped, that confession evaporated like dew in the blazing desert heat. He sinned yet again. He hardened his heart. Those profound words, they were nothing but a fragile paper shield raised against a hurricane.
And so the inevitable consequences of that hardened heart arrive. The scripture reveals that the Lord sends an east wind. I want you to imagine standing out in the devastated, smoldering fields of Egypt. The air is still. Then you hear it, a low, vibrating hum way off in the distance. It grows louder and louder, mutating into a deafening, mechanical roar. You look up to the horizon and the sky itself is quite literally being erased. A monolithic, impenetrable black cloud sweeps across the land, millions upon millions of locusts. They descend like a suffocating dark blanket over the earth. And the micro-narrative here is truly horrifying. Just listen to the clicking of countless millions of mandibles. They devour every single blade of grass, every tiny green leaf that somehow survived the hail. The Bible records that they covered the face of the whole land so that the land was completely darkened. The empire is stripped entirely bare. Nothing is left.
Now we enter into this incredibly intense, suffocating diplomatic standoff. The economy is in absolute ruins. Pharaoh attempts one last desperate negotiation to maintain some grip of control. On the left, we see his compromised offer. He looks at Moses and basically says, "Okay, go. Serve your Lord, but your flocks and your herds, they stay right here." He's trying to keep an economic tether on them. But on the right side, we see the unshakable posture of divine sovereignty. Moses does not even blink. The scripture records his unyielding demand. Our livestock must go with us. Not a single hoof shall be left behind. Not one hoof. Moses rejects the compromise entirely. The demand from the Creator is for unconditional, total liberation. The tension in that room is so thick, it's like a tightly stretched wire that's just about to snap. And then, the light is murdered. The scripture reveals that Moses stretches his hand toward heaven and a darkness falls over the land of Egypt. And I need you to really understand this. This is not just the sun going down. This is not the absence of light. The Bible describes it as a darkness that can be felt. Lower your breathing for a moment and imagine a blackness so thick, so impossibly heavy, it actually physically presses against your eyeballs. It's a suffocating atmospheric pressure. For 3 entire days, the mighty empire is paralyzed. The scripture records that they did not see one another, nor did anyone even rise from his place. The greatest architects and warriors on earth are just sitting there, frozen in the pitch black, listening to the sound of their own shallow breaths. But meanwhile, over in the territory of Goshen, the text reveals a staggering contrast. All the people of Israel had light where they lived. Warm, steady, quiet light. While the greatest empire on earth is entombed alive in the dark.
Eventually the darkness lifts, but the darkness inside the king's chest is now absolute. We return to the throne room one last time. Pharaoh is entirely stripped of his gods, his agriculture, his wealth, and his dignity. The scripture records the chilling, desperate roar of a completely, irreversibly hardened king. He looks at Moses, his voice trembling with a deadly, venomous rage, and issues his absolute decree. "Get away from me. Take care never to see my face again, for on the day you see my face you shall die." Just listen to the gravity of that threat, the last fragile thread of diplomacy, the tiny remaining window for negotiation, is violently severed by the pharaoh himself. He signs the death warrant of his own empire by slamming the door shut on the messenger of the divine.
Moses, standing incredibly tall amidst the invisible ruins of Egyptian pride, does not flinch. He doesn't plead. He doesn't offer one more warning. The scripture records his response, and it's delivered with this cinematic, devastating gravity, heavy as a falling stone. You have spoken well. I will never see your face again. The cold, unyielding precision of those words should send shivers down your spine. This is the absolute point of no return. The negotiation is officially over. The plagues of warning are entirely finished. Moses turns his back on the pharaoh and slowly walks out of the throne room. The die is cast. The stage is entirely cleared for the final, most devastating strike.
So we leave the Egyptian empire, suspended in this dreadful, unresolved quiet. The frogs are gone, the swarming flies are gone, the heavy ice has melted into the dirt, the locusts have been blown away by the wind. Even that suffocating darkness has lifted. But what is actually left? A shattered, broken kingdom, standing in the eerie silence of its own stubborn pride. The Bible records the stage being set for the midnight strike, the exact moment the shadow of death will pass over the land. We find ourselves staring right into the abyss of a doomed empire, forced to sit with a profoundly haunting question. And it's a question not just for the pharaoh, but for absolutely anyone who tries to stare down the divine. What remains when the light is entirely swallowed by a hardened heart?